I'm Kitty Bluefield, co-founder of New Strength and Saturée, creator of pro-metabolic food supplements and seriously saturated skincare. And today I'm back with my co-host and co-founder, Craig McDonald. Welcome back to the podcast, Craig.
Thanks for having me. It's always a pleasure.
It is always a pleasure, isn't it? It's bloody cold here at the moment, isn't it?
It's
pissing
today.
down rain.
Yes.
It's been pissing down rain.
Yeah.
Vic's favourite weather ops manager.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm like, hate
Good
this
times.
shit. Yeah.
Good times.
I want the sun to come out.
I
It's
know.
cold. I'm wearing a jumper.
I know.
Never wear a jumper
On
on
the
the
Gold
coast.
Coast, yeah.
It's Queensland.
Yeah.
It's like below anything 20 or below. Everyone's like, it's serious freezing.
Yeah, that's right. But let's be honest, no one gives a flying fuck about the weather on this podcast. So
True,
let's
that's
move on.
true. Okay.
Yeah.
Roger. Okay, protein. Today we're talking about, just doing a super quick one,
Yeah.
because lots of people always message me this question. How do I determine my protein targets, Craig?
Well, there's a few ways you can do it. Generally, the rough rule of thumb is always like 1 gram per pound of body weight, or 2.2 grams per kilo of body weight. Now,
So
obviously,
let's talk in kilos, because we're in Australia.
Yeah,
And the
yeah,
US
yeah.
people can bloody convert it to pounds.
Yeah. Well, listeners and both, come on. So 2.2 grams per kilo of body weight.
So sorry, what's the range?
So
there's
the range is like 1.6 grams up to 2.2 grams
Per kilo.
of body weight.
And would you say to people goal body weight?
Yeah, because so what I was just about to say before
I
you
cut
fucking rudely interrupted me,
Sorry.
as per usual, is that if you're somebody who's, say, 80 kilos or more, that means you're going to be up around, well, depending on that range you use, but you could be, 180 grams or more of protein per day. And the reality is just going that high is just
Don't need it.
really unwarranted. I mean, your protein's pretty high, but you obviously, lift pretty heavy weights and you have
And I
a
track
bit more
my
muscle.
collagen as well.
Yeah, and that's just something that you've gravitated to after many years of actually, starting a little bit lower and then just pushing it up because it's just your preference. And there's nothing wrong with eating more protein. I think in the society that we live now with the obesity epidemic, I believe it's 100%. I think a big portion of it is because of people are under muscled and they're just under eating protein. So from a strength training point of view, they're not lifting weights heavy enough to stimulate muscle growth. Plus, they're also not eating enough protein on a daily basis.
Probably shit takeaway processed food, which is low in protein.
High in
vegetables.
fat, and all that sort of thing. And there's a number of things. I'm not just saying that, but I think that is a big portion and certainly doesn't get hammered home enough, certainly by the mainstream nutritional media. But digressing, so, if you're somebody who's a bit more overweight, if you do that conversion, you're going to be having over 180 grams of protein per day. Just doesn't really need to be that high. Generally, whatever your goal body weight is, so if you want to get down to 65 kilos, you can then go middle of the road, maybe 1.8 grams, times that by a kilo, and that's going to put you up around whatever that works out, But most people within our program, depending on their body weight, they're going to be anywhere between 120 up to around 150 or 160 grams of protein. Anything in there is absolutely going to work. If you're in a calorie deficit, and certainly in a bit more of aggressive calorie deficit, you'd want to push it up to the higher end of that range. So what we said before, 1.6 grams or up to 2.2 grams. So that higher end of the range up towards 2.2 is going to make sense for somebody who's in a greater caloric deficit, just because they're in a catabolic state, so they're more prone to muscle wastage, protein breakdown. So it just makes sense to eat a little bit more. But if you're just at maintenance, or if you're even if you're in a slight surplus, which generally not a lot of the women listening to this would be, it's going to be mainly about body recomposition or fat loss. Having that high range. But again...
So if you, let's say, obviously if you enjoy this, if you're at maintenance or in a surplus, you could probably sit on the slightly lower end because carbs are protein sparing, right?
Yeah, that's exactly right. But there is a personal preference to that. You could do that. Yeah, if you preferred to have more carbs, absolutely, you could do that, no problem. And carbs are definitely protein sparing, so it just makes sense. But I've also got clients who they like just eating more protein because of the way they set up their diet. They like to have a few different sources of protein. They're also having eggs, they're also having milk. When you're incorporating a lot of that, like you and I have often spoken about that, it's just like
it's really hard.
It's hard to eat lower protein.
I don't feel like I have a huge... For example, when I make my tacos at night, I have only like 120 grams of prawns, but then I have some cheese and some yogurt. So that really jacks the protein up. Then there's some protein in orange juice and the tortillas. So
and the tortillas
it ends
itself.
up, there's quite a lot of protein in there. So I find it really difficult.
Yes.
to eat less protein. And I eat a lot of carbs, like 400 grams a day.
Yeah.
You know, so it's difficult. But I think you're right. I think women get really super stuck on like, what's the exact amount that's going to be right for me? I was chatting with a lady who was thinking about joining our program. And she said I think she was pretty heavy, 80 kilos. And she said, I've been eating 140 grams of protein. I'm like, that's fine. I said, does it feel good? Like, do you enjoy it? Is it sustainable for you? How are you feeling? She said, fine. I said, we'll stick with that.
Yes.
And then, you know, calories, then protein, and then you can make up the rest with fat and carbs.
Yeah.
So I think, like I guess it's about initially working it out. Like, so set your calories, then work out your protein.
Yep.
And then you can make the rest up in carbs and fat.
Yeah.
And to your preference.
And I was going to say, and that is very much a preference point, you know, like some people like to eat a lot more carbs and lower fat. Some people, just because of their food choices, generally have a bit more fat and more carbs. It's all going to work at the end of the day. You know, like really, you can get very nuanced about, you know, certainly with the carb, the fat thing. They're like, oh, the Randall cycle and the battle between, you know, fuel sources, between utilizing fat and carbs. And I'm like, if I hear one more person crap on about the fucking Randall cycle and why it is so important to not get them too mixed, because that's going to inhibit your ability to lose fat and be more metabolic. Shut the fuck up. I'm seriously, it's driving me bonkers at this point where people are majoring in the minors. They're focusing on this one little detail, but yet not even tracking their calories, not even tracking their protein intake, not even understanding their activity levels, not tracking their body weight every day. I'm just like, that's something that you can't measure. Yes, we all know because of science that is something that happens, but the role that it plays in the big picture is so fucking minute. I can't stress enough how much it drives me bonkers around. But people are talking about that, and I'm like, it's just something that doesn't matter. And the reality is, like,
or would you say it matters in, like, with that client? I'm just thinking of an example.
Yeah.
She's got insulin resistance, and you were testing with, like, keeping her fat very low.
Yeah.
So that her body's.
Yeah.
Like in that example.
Yeah, but that was a very extreme example.
Yeah, extreme.
Do you know what I mean? And I'm not dismissing that it doesn't play a role. And in her case, like she had some thyroid issues. She's also extremely stressed. She doesn't get enough sleep. She's also low on muscle mass. Like there's just so all of these things there that at that particular point, maybe it might make sense because, you know, because her body's already so stressed that bringing her fat down to a minimalist point where she's still ticking the boxes in terms of micronutrients, but trying to help bring down that stress state by increasing carbs, certainly around before she goes to bed. And, you know, we're trying to improve her sort of fasting insulin blood reads like on a morning basis, because they're really elevated at fasting. But when I would give her a lot of carbs for breakfast, they would only elevate within to the normal range. So she was a lot higher than the normal range before, but then when you'd actually give her the thing that by most doctors would say is the thing that causing it, we didn't actually see a response. So what it actually highlighted was, you know, during the night her stress hormones were really high. So it just made sense for that first meal to just go, okay, let's just try and make that more carbs and keep the fat a little bit lower. But that is one example, you know, and that's based off data that we already had to determine that was actually the case. She'd been tracking for a long time, tracking her food for a long time, body weight measurements, you know, your training, your activity. Like she was doing a lot of things for a long time for us to get to that decision. But a lot of people are making that decision or going to that thing of going, this is the reason what's causing it, without actually ever tracking any of that other stuff for long enough to actually make that objective, you know, decision. So that's what, you know, grinds my gears a little bit. Well, it's a lot, because people are still hyper focused on this one thing that they can't actually measure and is having little impact. Yeah. And we've just known it because we obviously we've worked with thousands and thousands of women that have all come from different, you know, backgrounds and diet history and, you know, body weight and body fat percentage and lower muscle mass and whatever, and different sort of chronic issues, that when you all get them to buy into the fact that it's like, we need to measure the things that matter. We need to track your food. You need to plan your food, track your food, and eat your food. You need to be getting some steps every day, try and get some sunlight, try and get to a decent amount of sleep at night, create a bit of bedtime routine, mitigate stress where you can, start building some muscle mass, all of these things, and they do that for a while. Generally, the whole metabolic flexibility thing is just something that happens as a result of just getting all of those things right. And all of our best transformations, we've never had to consider when you're eating fat and carbs and how that's going to make a difference in your ability to lose fat and gain muscle and all that sort of stuff. It's never, not once has it ever been an issue. Only with that particular individual and maybe one other person who were at a stage where they were dealing with, and this person also had some like chronic health issues as well before, you know. So it was quite a unique case, but the vast majority of people are not going to fit into that. And simply at the end of the day, ticking all those boxes and getting those things right over time and done consistently over time is what's ultimately going to lead them to get to that point where everything's working. But calories are king, protein is king, and then your ratio of carbs and fat should be based off preference, and then you design a meal plan based off your schedule, right? What your preferences are. Do you have to take into consideration like kids and family and building meals like that? I was going to say
that's probably just one other little small thing I wanted to include is, you know, how many meals. So, you know, I wrote that post a few weeks ago, and you and I talked about it. You know, I think, and it depends on the person and what actually fits their schedule. But some general rules of like that we found is that most women seem to do well anywhere between 4 to 6 meals a day. That's just on it. That's just like the majority.
Well, that's just how it falls into it. Because when you set a protein target that's within those ranges that I mentioned before, based off the person's body weight and you know what you know, if they're in a fat loss phase or whatever, it just generally works out that when you break down your meals to hit that protein target, it just makes the most sense to go either 4, 5, or 6 meals. If you go, you could do it in 2 meals
or 3, but again, it's like what fits.
But what fits? But most people don't like that. Most people are going to get hungry, and then usually means the protein servers are going to be quite high at each of those meals, and some people don't like eating like that. So
and
it's
from
just
a muscle protein synthesis perspective,
in
terms of growing muscle, what do the studies say?
Yeah, well, you would generally like anything above 20 grams on a per meal basis is going to stimulate.
Every how many hours? Well,
again, you don't really need to look at it hours because it's going to work out for the total protein per day. So if you just kind of go, well, I'm having 140 grams of protein per day and I need to get above 20 grams at a minimum in order to facilitate that muscle protein synthesis and create that anabolic environment, then just you reverse engineer that. What's that going to work out? Well, 6 meals, it's going to be this much grams of protein per day. 5 meals is going to be this. 4 meals like that. 3 meals, it's going to be this, but that's going to be a pretty big serving. So again, it's just what
works for you. Because some women like 3 bigger meals and 3 snacks. Some like 3 bigger meals, 2 snacks. Some people like 4 evenly spread meals. Again, like you said, I think the most important thing is to calories, then the protein, then figure out the carbs and fat, then do a meal plan that fits your schedule, and I think is relatively balanced. Like, you know, you don't want to have like 5 grams of protein and 50 grams of carbs at a meal. You want to try and have like, if you're going to have snacks, you know, it might be 15 to 20 grams for a snack. And then if you're going to have your main meals, obviously they'll be larger. And it's you don't have to get so stressed about, you know, but I just also think if you're eating on a regular, like once you find the schedule that suits you and then you eat regularly at those times, your body likes that consistency and gets used to eating that and it balances your blood sugar. And I think a lot of the women that come to us, they were very much like me. Like I used to skip meals. You know, one of our friends who does doing our program skips meals and then ends up binge eating in the night time. So, you know, starting your day with good breakfast and then eating regularly after that just helps to balance your blood sugar, keep those stress hormones low, gives you more energy, gets you into the habit of eating and skipping those meals. I think that's a big thing. But a lot of women just don't eat. And then when you're starving, you just end up eating shit. You're hungry. You're starving. So I think that's a really good habit to get into. So maybe just a quick recap. So 1.6 to 2.2 grams per kilo of your goal body weight is a good starting point. So if you are in a deficit or a more aggressive deficit, you'd want to go to the higher end of the range. If you're at maintenance or surplus, you can sit at the lower end of the range if you want to. If you enjoy that and you want to have more carbs, but you can still sit at the high range and then make up the rest. It's personal preference. And really, it's about finding what works for you and your body and what you enjoy and what you can be most consistent with.
And sometimes I think, even though you might have your calories and your macro targets set out and then you build a plan, sometimes doing it in reverse, you know, so often I'll talk to clients, I'll be like, start with enjoyment first.
Yep.
Understand all the foods that you'd like to eat and what sounds good from a meal plan perspective. Start building your meal plan and just see what it looks like at the end. Like, see where your protein total comes out, see where your carbs are and your fat total's out. And then you can kind of go, well, does that fit within that range? Yeah, it actually does. Okay, sweet. Just run with that and see how that goes, And then just once protein's generally set, you can just kind of manipulate your carbs and fats up and down if you want to have a bit more of a deficit or a little bit more of a surplus. But that's a really, really easy way. But if it doesn't, you're probably not going to be too far off. And then you can just kind of manipulate it up into the range. So I think sometimes taking that reverse approach purely just from an enjoyment factor. It's like, what would I enjoy to eat? Yeah. Well, just build it and just see what it looks like.
Yeah, because if you want to lose weight, you've got to stick to that calorie deficit. If you don't like what you're eating and you're not enjoying it, it's hard. Yeah. It's very hard. And I think that's what a lot of women say in our program. They come in and like, this food is so bloody delicious. Yeah. Like they love eating the food. It's so much, they enjoy it. They look forward to it. I've got the beef cheek bolognese tonight with some spaghetti and some juice. Yeah. I'm so excited about that. I love that bloody beef cheek bolognese. Crispy skin barramundi with air fried potatoes. Which Craig has every night just about. Except for never gets old. The nights, occasionally we'll have something that I'm having, or on the weekends if we go out. Yeah. But I like what I like. That's right. And I put here's a red hot tip for anyone. There's marmalade on your fish. I know it seems a little bit weird, but don't knock it until you try it. It is pretty nice. Yeah. Mel likes that too. Yeah. Yeah. That's where I got it from. Marmalade in bulk now. Yeah. Don't we? Yeah. We've got like 30 jars sitting in the bloody cupboard. Yeah. Good one. All right. Yeah. Hope that was helpful, guys. And as always, take a screenshot of the episode and share it on Instagram stories and tag me at KITTYBLOMFIELD. And each month I pick a winner who shared a podcast and you get a tub of Saturée Premium Collagen valued at $79. And we'll see you again next week.